Well, now you got into this mess by going down a waterfall. Now, how would you suppose we can get them out of there?
By going up the waterfall?
That's right. Anything's possible in Disneyland.
Welcome, friends, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Up the Waterfall with your hosts, Zanna and Scott Otis.
Hello there.
This is episode number 44.
Ooh, I like 44.
A World on the Move.
That's right.
Tomorrowland, 67.
Ooh, that's
With
a good one.
A focus on adventure through inner space, question mark?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll probably get to ride a few attractions.
My main area of research was on everything, although I did read a lot about adventure through inner space.
Wasn't it fascinating?
Because I did not experience it, unlike you.
Yeah, in this episode, we're literally traveling to my childhood. This is something. This is very near and dear to my heart. This is like a 7-year-old me going to Disneyland.
Well, after reading more about it, I have some questions for you, but I'll wait until we get to that section. Basically, as Walt Disney said at the dedication of Tomorrowland in 1955, his original idea for it would be a vista into the world of wondrous ideas, signifying man's achievements, a step into the future with predictions of constructive things to come. Tomorrow offers new frontiers in science, adventure, and ideals, the atomic age, the challenges of outer space, and the hope for a peaceful and unified world. Quote,
I like that.
Walt Disney. But I will say, as you know, many of us know, Tomorrowland in 1955 wasn't really that Tomorrowland-y.
No.
And very soon after, it had become Todayland.
Pretty much, yeah.
There was originally Flight to the Moon. Is that what it's called? Rocket to the Moon?
Well, yeah, Rocket to the Moon originally.
And
that had the Moonliner.
Yes.
With the big rocket. And that was kind of the weenie of the land at that time.
the Hall of Chemistry.
The Hall of Chemistry, presented by Monsanto.
Yes. And something else.
There were a bunch of little things like that.
But yeah, it was really like the last place that he was focusing on for opening of Tomorrowland.
Yes.
He did, I guess, try to get the squid from 20,000 Leagues to open with the park, but it took them 3 weeks later to
literally
get that.
The night before opening day, Walt and I can't remember who he was with. I might have been, oh my gosh, Ken Anderson.
Yes, I knew that was the name of it.
Yeah, they were frantically, painting fluorescent paint, trying to get the thing open for the next day, for opening day, and it was not to be. But it opened 3 weeks later.
Yeah, with a whole new skin.
That's right.
They chopped it to bits. But anyway, back to, the rest of Tomorrowland. Walt knew that it needed new representations of the future. And this was, of course, a time which I'm now rewatching Mad Men with Sophia.
Yeah.
So I'm really in this time
it's right
frame.
around that time frame, yeah.
And it's a great thing to watch and think about, especially because I'm also reading the Walt Disney biography.
Wow.
Which they're not into that area yet. They're still in the 30s, but just
it'll get there.
Thinking about how people sold things back then, it was just a completely different time.
Absolutely.
And it's very interesting now reading this book to imagine Walt trying to sell, Mickey Mouse cartoons and things like that, short films, and just the way things was completely different. And if you watch Mad Men, you know what I'm talking about. You were selling emotions and feelings, and whether they were real or true or not, it was, people ate it up, and that's what they wanted from an experience or something that was being sold to them. And I think it was a different time where corporations were viewed differently. Like a partnership with a corporation was a good thing, which they still happen today, of course, but they're often looked at with more scorn as far as like, oh, this is just a sponsored thing, or, they're selling out and all this stuff. But obviously Walt has been doing it from the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And they were really the way that these attractions came to be, and the way that companies could highlight the things they wanted to highlight. In Monsanto's case, it was a lot of chemical stuff and the positive side of chemicals and things like that. But, if you think about it, Walt Disney sent guests to the moon back in 1955, 2 years before Sputnik was launched.
Yeah, which was, the first orbiting thing.
And 3 years before the American satellite was launched, and 14 years before man would even step on foot on the moon itself. So it was really a time when the world stood still and watched together as scientists tested out their theories and skills to bring about a better understanding of space and the Earth. And scientists were learning to control and harness atoms and manipulate molecules, which is kind of what Adventure Through Inner Space was talking about, to create a better tomorrow with their new discoveries. And Americans were watching and listening to it all with great anticipation of what the future would bring. It wasn't like, oh no, science is bad. It was, plastics and synthetic fibers and textiles were like amazing to everyone.
Things that can improve your life.
Yeah, and it was the future. And they were excited about it. It was like back when, flying cars and things like that were what they hoped for. But things like plastics and all of these crazy things like the House of Tomorrow were actually, happening. And it was amazing to see. In addition, audio animatronics had since become a major part of building attractions because of the World's Fair and things like that. So bringing Carousel of Progress was another major part of this new Tomorrowland. Again, so many more advancements in Imagineering. The OmniMover was created, which we'll talk about. But yeah, like I said, companies were much more trusted and, admired and respected for their work, bringing their advances to the country. And nowadays, things are more questioned and, it's not the same time frame. So I think all of this is necessary to kind of get you back into that frame of mind of how things were back in the 60s. And it was really just a different way of looking at things. In addition, before you jump into your thing, because I don't have much else to say after I do all of this rambling, but Adventure Through Inner Space was, as we said, the first OmniMover. But it was also a time when, up until then, science and all of the attractions had been like, science is great and nothing's going to go wrong. This is a great ride and everything's fine. But the Adventure Through Inner Space put those questions out there like, well, the snowflake is melting. What's going to happen? Or am I going to shrink into the world of the atom and never return? Whereas that had never happened in
it wasn't
Disney
quite
attraction.
what we have now where like, something dramatically goes wrong and your life is in danger. It's like things are, maybe not the way we thought that they would happen, and are we going to be okay?
Yeah. And so this was the first time that Disney had kind of done that, kind of like, hey, something could happen. Like nothing did happen because they're like, oh, the snowflake is melting, but we're going back, so it's fine. But now the formula really is, for the most part, like, uh-oh, something went wrong.
Drastically
oh, no.
wrong.
And the ride completely changes. So it's kind of like status quo. But that was really, the first time that had happened. So that was kind of a new direction as well. In addition, through, the 80s and 90s, science was much more questioned and doubted and things like that. And thinking of Alien Encounter as an example of that, it was just like, oh, it's fine, everything's going to be fine. But then it wasn't fine. The science and the technology didn't work the way that you were supposed to. You can say that about Dinosaur and the whole thing. So they wouldn't have viewed science in that way back then. It was just like, what do you mean? Scientists know everything. Nothing can go wrong. So yeah, that was just getting everyone into the frame of mind and what the world and Disneyland was like back then.
And that was great. I will go a little bit backwards, if you don't mind, just to give a little bit more of a history of the Tomorrowland. We did, you touched upon a lot of those things. Tomorrowland, as we said, was the last thing that Walt even planned.
Right.
He kind of like put it on the back burner and like, okay, we got to get something going. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, there were a lot of more like state fair exhibit type things,
yes.
such as Space Station X1, which kind of showed the Earth from 50 miles up. There was the Bathroom of Tomorrow, presented by Crane, which actually had an all-pink toilet.
Wow,
and
this is the first I'm hearing of it.
And gold-plated toilet paper fixtures. Such things as the Thimbledrome Flight Circle, where people could take their model airplanes and fly them around.
Wow.
And they had a Hobbyland where you could actually buy those model airplanes. Really just weird things like this. As you mentioned, also the Hall of Chemistry, which was Monsanto's first sponsored attraction there. They had such things as the American Dairy Association, or a dairy bar that showed you how cows were milked, and you could have a cow be more relaxed by having them watch television. And then
how very 50s of them.
And at the end, you could get a nice cold glass of milk.
Wow.
Yeah. The Hall of Aluminum Fame, presented by Kaiser.
I do remember hearing of this.
Which had Cap, the pig, K-A-P, the Kaiser Aluminum Pig.
Was he made out of aluminum?
He was.
Wow.
Yeah, everything there was made out of aluminum. So it was absolutely
it's funny,
radical.
My whole life of knowing about that attraction, I always just think of a giant tinfoil ball. and I know that there's more to aluminum than just aluminum foil, but that's what I always pictured.
They had a guy in a spacesuit who would kind of roam around the land and would often be in there. But I think they even had hostesses that wore skirts that were made out of aluminum.
Wow.
I don't know if those lasted too long. But yeah, just a lot of weird things. And then, Disneyland was going strong through the 50s, and right around the time of this new Tomorrowland, 1967, things were really changing in the company, as you had mentioned. Walt had his 4 attractions at the World's Fair that brought forth audio animatronics, massive ways to move a lot of people, which the It's a Small World boat ride, as well as their Ford Magic Skyway, which would kind of
be the precursor.
The precursor, yes, of both PeopleMover and Adventure Through Inner Space, the OmniMover system. But in addition to that, that was kind of Walt's first foray into delving in the East Coast, trying to get an East Coast audience. So he's got his minds thinking about the Florida Project, Project X, a Walt Disney World, but not just bringing the Magic Kingdom to Florida, but also Epcot Center, and not the park that we know of, but the city, the city of tomorrow. So he's starting to think of all of these big ideas, and so in doing so, he actually visits a lot of companies and their labs, like such things as Monsanto, General Dynamics, and even Bell Labs. That was one of his favorites, just as a way of kind of seeing what industries were working on so that he could bring them into Epcot, but also into this new Tomorrowland. And so so when they kind of leveled that Tomorrowland to bring forth the new one, pretty much all of these exhibits were taken out. Gone was the Avenue of the Flags, the Clock of the World, this 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea exhibit, Hobbyland and the Flight Circle, the Space Bar, a restaurant, a yacht bar, which was where the queue for the submarines is now, and that was kind of they literally picked it up and moved it to where the Tomorrowland Terrace is now. The 76-foot tall Moonliner, which was the weenie of Tomorrowland, that was gone, and the Home of the Future, which was also presented by Monsanto, showcasing plastics and that kind of thing. That actually did last that first summer of 1967, so it was there side by side.
I really wish I could have seen that.
Oh my gosh, me too.
They should rebuild it, in my opinion.
And the House of the Future is, it was where the kind of the little water gardens, like King Triton's or Pixie Hollow is now. It was at one point King Triton's. It's now Pixie Hollow. That's where that was. So it's kind of off to the left. But also, at this time, the monorail had already been introduced in 1959. The submarine voyage also in 1959, and the Autopia was an opening day attraction. Those stayed. You had mentioned Rocket to the Moon. That stayed. But they changed it, and so
they upgraded it.
That's right, they upgraded it. So, in 1967, actually July 18th, 1967, they dedicated this new land, which is pretty much 12 years after Disneyland opened, at a cost of $23 million.
Crazy to think about.
Which, $1967. But it included a lot of things. As you had mentioned also, they had brought the Carousel of Progress from the World's Fair, and they had installed it in the back of the land where the space bar used to be. But there is also a fun thing in that one that we'll talk about later. The Autopia, which had already been there, they actually introduced a brand new a new look to all the cars. The Mark 7, which actually lasted all the way from 67 until 1999.
Wow.
That was the stalwart of the Autopia cars that Bob Gurr had designed. So those were, fancier, much kind of more futuristic looking.
Yeah. I recently read a little bit about that too. I had no idea. I knew that like when they first did it, they just let the kids go in and they kind of like crashed everything. They had given all of the kids of the designers a chance to ride, and there was something like 36 cars, and they had crashed all but 6 of them or something like that.
All but 2 actually in the first week.
So that's when they then designed the giant little bumper that went around the side of it. But what I didn't know was that the track, like the crazy design of the track, the roadway, was because they had originally planned it after California roads, and it was supposed to be like
with the fancy new clover leaves and all of that.
So it was kind of a, hey kids, you can learn how to drive California freeways here in Disneyland, and then you'll be great when you can get a car.
Because the interstate highway system was kind of a brand new thing. That was kind of the Eisenhower's thing from the mid-50s, and they actually gave kids little driver's licenses, which they kind of still do even to this day.
So I thought it was just, Disneyland is Disneyland, and it was full of crazy turns.
But what's also weird about that is they didn't have the little guide rail that they have now, and the track was wider than 2 cars, so you could actually pass a car. And
and
of
we've
course,
all heard those opening day stories.
Yeah, and crazy kids, they would actually kind of like find a way to do a U-turn and then go the wrong way and have head-on collisions. Not cool.
Crazy kids. Yeah. I'll have more to say about crazy kids when we get to Adventures Through Inner Space.
So anyway, so the Autopia, that was brand new. The Circarama, which kind of was a very early attraction that had the 360-degree films using 11 projectors, that actually got upgraded to the America the Beautiful.
Sponsored by American Motors.
Well, the Circarama was.
Oh. They changed Circarama? Okay. I don't know where I read that. I've read so much recently.
Because Bell Labs was, they presented the America the Beautiful.
So there was a fun tidbit going back. This has nothing to do with 67, but Circarama.
Circarama, yeah.
People were wondering if it was named that way because it was sponsored by American Motors to have car in the title. Isn't that
I think... Yeah, I actually saw that too, and I wasn't sure which, because there's no definitive answer to that. I think it probably was, but I don't know.
Because it was based on the Cinerama,
right, which has
that Walt
Rama.
saw and was
so
like,
where
wow,
was
why
the
can't
R?
we do this? Yeah.
Interesting.
Who knows?
But anyway, so this had 9 projectors now, and it had a much more fun film, I think. Which actually included quite a bit of Disneyland footage as well, as we remember. The Astro Jets, this was kind of the big key. The Astro Jets, which were down on the ground, they were moved up, and they became the Rocket Jets. And they put in the PeopleMover here, And then on top of that, they put the rocket jets, and so now this is the brand new weenie of the land, which was this.
That signage for rocket jets is perhaps one of my favorite.
Yeah.
The font and the design of it is just like so perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And so this has the completely iconic look of the brand new Tomorrowland. So with the PeopleMover being right in the center and the tracks coming right out to the kind of the hub, but right before getting to the hub, they kind of split. One going into that first building on the right as you're looking into Tomorrowland, and then eventually coming out of the building on the left and going back into the station. And it was, the PeopleMover was an epic attraction that basically went all through Tomorrowland, showcasing all of these new attractions and some old ones, but then also going out into the land, all of the the land over Autopia, and into Fantasyland. Yeah, and I'll get more into that in a bit. And then, of course, Adventure Through Inner Space, which we will touch on later. So I was going to start by actually going on the PeopleMover.
Okay.
Presented by Goodyear.
Yes.
The Go Go Goodyear song.
Yes. I was going to say that part of what makes Tomorrowland 67 so memorable is just the musical suite, if you will, that appeared when it, I don't know what was there before because I don't know. I have
no idea, yeah.
But, Go Go Goodyear, the whole PeopleMover soundtrack while you were on there, and then, of course, Miracles from Molecules. Mm-hmm. In the, I guess, post-show. Plus the song from the Carousel of Progress, of course. Yeah. So it really was a very musical, and it fit with the time frame, too. I don't know how you could do something equivalent to that today, It just was a different time. That
my suggestion would be to go back to that.
Yeah.
It was so perfect. So anyway, you would board the speed ramp, presented by Goodyear, going up to the platform on the second floor, and you'd get into these PeopleMover cars that were continuously moving, which was based off of the, as I mentioned, the Ford Magic Skyway.
I've heard that the speed ramp had some issues and would break down often.
It did break down often, and it kind of created a bottleneck.
Backup.
Yeah, because if there was a backup on the top, you'd have people kind of going up into the backs of these people that weren't quite loaded. But because it was a continuously moving attraction, it was a kind of a people eater. It actually put a lot of people through at the same time. But you'd come, I think there were like 4 cars at a time, and unlike the PeopleMovers here at Disney World that don't have a roof, I guess the cars themselves don't have a roof, but the attraction does. This one, the cars themselves have little roofs that actually raised up, kind of at a tilt, so that as you boarded, and then as you
very cool
disembarked as well. And then before the car would go, it would go back to normal, and then it would go off onto that lovely thing going towards the hub, and then entering the building of Adventure Through Inner Space, presented by Monsanto. And if you remember, actually, they have also the exterior of these buildings has what they kind of brought back very recently, these little futuristic designs with the little swoops and things like that, and kind of interesting, kind of like mosaic-y kind of things with very futuristic looking.
Yes.
But anyway, going into Adventure Through Inner Space, you would basically see the mighty microscope and see all of the goings on there that would entice you to visit this attraction later. Seeing all of these people kind of going towards the automobiles and then disappearing into the microscope somehow. But just only long enough to get you enticed, and then, of course, it would leave because you're on the PeopleMover, and now you're in the exit. You can see the exit of that, and you see that all the people are getting off. They were safe. Everything's going to be okay. And then it would go through the character shop, which at the time, which was brand new, the second largest gift shop in all of Disneyland behind the Emporium. And then it would go off out of that building, and at that time, it would go over the, there was kind of like a band stand area which would later become the Flying Saucers attraction, which would later then become Space Mountain. So they would do that.
It's hard to imagine a time without Space Mountain, but there was one.
I know.
For quite some time.
Quite a bit. Actually, you have 10 full years of this new Tomorrowland without the Space Mountain. But then, and by the way, unlike the PeopleMover here at the Magic Kingdom, this one had elevation gains and, so it actually went up pretty high as it entered the second floor of the Carousel of Progress.
How high did it go?
I don't know. You tell me.
34 feet.
That's very high.
It was the highest point of the PeopleMover.
Wow. At one point, it actually goes over the Skyway.
The Skyway or the monorail?
The Skyway.
Wow.
Well, it also goes over the monorail.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But it's right at the beginning of the Skyway as it exits this. But anyway, so as it's going through the Carousel of Progress, we are now looking at the thing that I was talking about before, the little teaser as to what Walt was working on, the Progress City. And you think you've seen the model here at Magic Kingdom. No. That might be, I think, 20 to 25% of what was the original Progress City model.
And it was fully operational, like cars on streets moving.
Yep.
The carnival rides that they had, a little fair happening, moving, lights on.
Each of the little houses had individual lights that would come on and off.
I really, really wish that there was some high quality footage of that somewhere, because it's just the part that we see is always, our favorite part of riding on the PeopleMover here. But I can't imagine how amazing the whole thing must have been.
Because if you can imagine, it took the entire second floor of the Carousel of Progress. Basically, after you rode the Carousel of Progress, you would go upstairs to see this giant model. Yeah. And that's kind of why they have that the little exterior stairway that kind of rotates around the exterior of the building. That was the exit. After visiting Progress City, that's how people would get down from that second floor. But the PeopleMover went through that and saw that, and later, in later iterations, that would become the Tron Super Speed Tunnel. Back after they got rid of that. But anyway, so it would leave the second floor of the Carousel of Progress, and this is its highest point that you had mentioned. And it's actually going over now the entrance, or kind of the beginning of the Skyway to Fantasyland. So as the Skyway buckets are going up, the PeopleMover is actually going right over it.
Wow.
And that's where it basically goes off into the land of the Autopia cars, and with this fancy new design. And back then they had the Tomorrowland Autopia, and later they would add the Fantasyland Autopia, the motorboat cruise, the monorail would be going on, the submarine voyage. And all of this is why they called this Tomorrowland the World on the Move, or the Land on the Move.
A world on the move.
Because it would have all this kinetic energy going on. All of these PeopleMover cars.
A monorail, a PeopleMover, a submarine, a Skyway bucket.
And even the rotation of the Carousel of Progress, the rocket jets going off, everything. It was just absolutely, this was why it was my favorite land as I was growing up. This was the best. And so it would go off, and you would even go as far as It's a Small World and see all of that, and then go along the monorail at one point, and then go into the final attraction, which was the America the Beautiful, and you would see the pre-show and the post-show, which had all kinds of weird things, kind of exhibits brought to you by Bell Labs, including such things as speaker phones and family phones, where you would, as a family, you would enter a booth and be able to make a phone call all together. And I remember, bizarre. I personally remember going in there and making like long distance phone calls.
Weird.
From in there. It was the most interesting thing.
Very odd.
And so the first thing you'd see is the people that were lined up, kind of waiting to go in the attraction, and then you would also see the post show as well. And then it would hop out of that building and join that center track, going away from the hub towards the, as I mentioned, that the kind of the center of all of this, with the rocket jets on top and the PeopleMover platform in the second floor. Exit your vehicle and go out. And of course, having seen all of these fun attractions, you would of course want to see Adventure Through Inner Space first, I would think.
I would think.
I would think so too.
It had a lot going for it.
It really did.
A lot of new things, you know?
And I actually forgot to mention one thing. I'm sorry. As you were going along that path, those were those Mary Blair murals on either side, kind of showcasing, on one side, because all of the like the sun energy and water and the kinds of things that would provide energy for.
It was like the future of tomorrow as seen through the eyes of children or something
and I think,
like that.
One side had children.
Yeah.
Which, of course, that was kind of a Mary Blair staple. And then one kind of was more energy focused.
Yeah.
It was just like the promise of tomorrow.
Yes.
But yeah, so Walt had actually befriended the Monsanto's Dr. Charles Allen Thomas. He was a big executive there, and that's actually through his friendship. That's where they got the sponsorship for the Hall of Chemistry and the House of the Future. But he suggested that he wanted to do another thing where they kind of went into inner space, because by this time we had already been to outer space and gone there, but nobody had really ever gone to inner space.
I wonder if it was even called inner space before.
I know that they did there were a couple of other names for the attraction, including Magic Microscope and Micro World, before they settled on Adventure Through Inner Space. And what's also interesting is that they settled on Adventure Through Inner Space, but with the through being THRU.
It was a different time. There was accepted abbreviations back then.
Yeah, which I absolutely love that, and it was no other way.
Yeah.
There are a couple of Disney books that misspell it with the full word through, but it was THRU. Anyway, but what was just so fascinating about this attraction, it was, as you mentioned, the first iteration of the OmniMover system, which they had developed also from the Ford Magic Skyway. And this was something where they were able to get 2 to 3 people, or 2.5 people, in a what we now know as like the Haunted Mansion's doom buggies, but painted blue.
Because remember, the Haunted Mansion didn't exist at this time.
Yeah, this was the first time.
The house was up there, but nothing was in it.
So before this, there had pretty much only been shows where if you were like off to the side, maybe you wouldn't quite get the best view being right in the center. So this is like everyone gets a perfect view. You're going to be right there, and it's going to be like showing. They designed
the scenes around the fact that they could control what people were seeing.
Exactly.
So it really
and
changed
that's the whole
things.
point of the OmniMovers, is that they could control what you're looking at. And so they would be able to have a scene off to the left and then put another one off to the right and have you basically swivel the car at a certain point so that you would see it just so.
Yeah. It's really, amazing to think. It's things that we take for granted now that, like, they didn't exist before this ride.
Yeah, so before this, so people, as they were writing this, was like the first time they'd ever encountered anything like this. I mean, there were the Fantasyland dark rides, but those were very quick and basically told the story of that, animated film pretty quickly. But here, you're basically going into the world of the molecules and atoms. And as you go into the little pre-show area, which with that curving walkway, which we now know as the curving walkway of Star Tours.
I've still never been on Star Tours in Disneyland, so.
Well, the Star Tours, at Disneyland came first, but the Star Tours at Disney World, they have the same, that same kind of rotating queue area, but where the Star Speeder 2000 or whatever it is sits, that's where the mighty microscope was. And so it was just a massive microscope, I think 37 foot tall. And so as you're looking at it, you're basically seeing all of these vehicles entering it.
Yes.
There's a hole just big enough for it to enter with all of these guests in it. And like, where are they going? And, one after one, each one goes in and doesn't come out. But you see, as the microscope progresses, a glass tube about halfway up, and you see those automobiles with tiny little guests. Except now, instead of being full size, they're maybe a half foot tall, just like 6 inches, and they have guests in there. Supposedly they're moving. They're actually not. And the microscope is pointed at there is a giant snowflake on the wall, but there's actually like a little prism-y thing that has a bunch of like snow, like snowflakes going in, and so you're actually being injected into a tiny snowflake.
The funny part is that a microscope would not do that.
Yeah, a microscope is
meant to magnify something on the other end of it.
Is meant to take small things and make them bigger.
Yeah.
And here, this mighty microscope is making big things small.
But everyone was just totally okay with that and on board with the crazy display.
Yeah. But it was the most radical thing because because it's an OmniMover system and it's going by, it's a non-stop system, 2 people at a time going in, the line moved pretty quickly. They did have some displays in the queue area. I honestly have no idea how anybody would have had time to read these or to see the little things, but it basically had I think there were 8 of them, and they kind of showed what you were going to see. But there would be the announcer saying, "Your attention, please. This is the tracking procedure of an adventure through inner space. Adventurous men of science who have made this journey before you are carefully plotting every phase of this incredible journey as you shrink beyond the smallness of an atom, the smallest building block of matter. We wish you an enlightening experience, for though your body will shrink, your mind will expand."
Whoa, that's deep.
Yeah. And so there was one of those kind of things for each of the little show exhibits in the queue area, which, as I said, I have no idea how anybody would have had a time to look at it because the line is moving so quickly. But then you would enter your Atomobile and enter face first into the microscope. And this was the craziest part because it's dark in there. There's no light. And somehow they kind of wiggle your little Atomobile, and suddenly you're going backwards. I have no idea how they did this. And I don't know where they went, but obviously you're shrinking and
into
it goes somewhere.
A snowflake, obviously.
Yeah. So you're basically injecting this into a snowflake, and it's just the weirdest thing that they have little like snowflake crystals, like physical giant snowflake crystals that you're going through.
Well, I think what is so interesting is that, with the exception of the snowflakes, beyond that, all of the representations are very surreal.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, what does a nucleus look like? Who knows? Maybe it looks like this.
Monsanto knows.
Yeah, but like to try to explain like what it actually looks like, was not something that anyone could have wrapped their head around going on a 6-minute ride. So they really had to make everything kind of just, themes and like this is pulsing light and things like that. And it worked though, like everything came together, and despite it not being like such a strict, severe, like scientific explanation, it made sense and people loved it.
That's right. So I forgot to mention, as you entered your Atomobile, you can hear the thought patterns of the first visitor, who starts off by saying, "For centuries man had but his own 2 eyes to explore the wonders of his world. Then he invented the microscope, a mighty eye, and discovered the fantastic universe beyond the limits of his own meager sight. Now your adventure through inner space has begun. Through Monsanto's mighty microscope, you will travel into this incredible universe found within a tiny fragment of a snowflake. I am the first person to make this fabulous journey. Suspended in the timelessness of inner space are the thought waves of my first impressions. They will be your only source of contact once you have passed beyond the limits of normal magnification. magnification, and it would kind of echo magnification.
I really, was wanting to do my Paul Frees impression.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just stole that from me, but
And that's the thing. This thing was narrated by the magnificent Paul Frees,
I love him so much.
who later would be, actually, he had just been introduced as the pirate, the guy in Pirates of the Caribbean, which had just opened maybe 6 months before. The
Auctioneer?
Yes. And then later would become the
Ghost
ghost host in the Haunted Mansion in '69. He was also the original Pillsbury Doughboy.
I just love his voice and
Oh, yeah.
his intonation and tone and everything, especially in the adventure through inner space narration, is just like perfection to me.
Yeah, I forgot. He was also the Ludwig von Drake.
Oh, well, that's a whole different thing.
But yeah, it's really perfect here. And so basically you're hearing, I guess, these thought patterns as you go through, and there's so many questions that he's asking, like, should I go here?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Basically, like, what, am I going to keep on shrinking forever?
Because these are the things like that you couldn't explain this easily, so that's how they chose to explain everything. Was like,
right.
I'm gonna go.
So the first part of this ride is, you can see a physical manifestation of the actual snowflakes, with like little crystal lattices and that kind of thing. And then as you're getting smaller, the snowflakes are getting bigger, and they're kind of like really massive ice chunks that all of the automobiles are kind of weaving through. And then as you basically get even smaller, you're now surrounded by a bunch of molecules, which, since snowflake is made of water, that would be H2O, a little hydrogen molecule with 2 oxygen molecules. And then you can see they had a lot of projections as well. And so projected on the wall were just a ton of these molecules with the spinning electrons, a whole bunch of them. But then you go into one of them, and so now there's kind of like a physical thing of a giant, like a whole bunch of spinning electrons with like tons of tubes and that kind of thing. As the voice keeps telling you that you're going deeper and deeper, and like now we should go to the atom itself, or the nucleus. And that's when it really gets surreal, and you kind of hear a thumping, almost like a heartbeat.
Yeah, the heartbeat of the nucleus.
That's right. And there was like an actual strobe in there that kind of represented the beating of this nucleus, which, and at this point, since you're so deep within a molecule, there's now nothing else around it except for this.
Yeah.
But the music is just getting very eerie and creepy, and the guy, our narrator, is like saying, like, do I dare go into the nucleus and explore the depths of its inner realm?
Yeah. And then you're also hearing the tracking people.
Oh, that's right. I've totally forgot about these guys.
Saying like, we've lost contact.
Yeah.
So
this is the first, like, maybe we're in danger here, and like
exactly as we were mentioning earlier.
Like,
this is it.
if we go farther, we will keep on shrinking to nothing.
Yeah.
But suddenly, of course,
the problem Ant-Man had, if you recall, into the quantum realm.
That's a good point. But
he got out.
Luckily, for some reason, the snowflake starts to melt.
Yes.
I guess that saves us?
I don't know. I didn't ride it.
I also don't know.
And why did it melt?
I don't know.
These are questions we'll never know.
Maybe the little guys did that to save us.
Maybe.
But we don't know. And so you're seeing now, basically hearing like a lot of bubbly type things, and you can see a whole bunch of bubbles. I guess we're starting to get bigger. And then the guy says, the actual guy says, we've got you on scope, and we're pulling you out. And at this point, we actually pass by the microscope again, and we can actually see an actual eyeball of a guy looking through the microscope at us. By the way, this person has blue eyes, or at least he has one blue eye. And you could see the actual blue eyeball kind of going back and forth looking at you. And apparently you're now going back to normal. And shortly after this, the ride ends. But before you actually disembark the Automobile, you actually go through the post-show area a little bit. And you can actually see what's going on.
Yeah, the different displays.
Yeah, so it doesn't just end and then you get off the vehicle. It actually goes through the post-show area, so you can see all of these things. And then it gets to the exit area, dumping you into that post-show area presented by Monsanto, where you would hear the great Miracles from Molecules, written by the Sherman Brothers.
Yes, it's very catchy.
Oh, incredibly so.
And that's where Monsanto was like, hey, we can manipulate molecules and atoms and make really fun stuff for you to enjoy. Here's some examples. And that was because, if anyone's seen The Graduate with, what's his face, Dustin Hoffman, and, plastics. This was that time frame. Before that, these things didn't exist.
I actually think that movie came out the same year.
Maybe it did.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look back. I think that was 67.
But yeah, it really was, a moment in time.
Oh, yeah. And they had this...
A lot was going on.
They had this fascinating exhibit also. It was kind of some, I believe, like a model in some plastic type clothing, but it was surrounded by all of these intricate strings in a kind of like in a rotating fashion, but each of these individual strings, and there must have been hundreds of them, had little beads of oil that would drip down them to give it a very interesting effect as you kind of looked. So that like each string was maybe like just not even an inch apart, and so all of these strings were surrounding the model inside.
Weird.
But with little beads of oil coming down to give it like a beaded effect, like crystal kind of a thing. It was very odd, and like it made me think, like, if somebody touched that, there would be oil everywhere, right?
Was it really oil, or did you just think it was?
No, it was oil.
Weird.
Yeah, dripping oil going down the strings. Yeah. So yeah, and as I said, they had all of these fun exhibits, kind of showcasing how Monsanto was able to manipulate molecules into things that would make our lives better.
Yes. And one thing they learned on this attraction was that kids and adults alike like to grab at anything they can get their hands on. Yeah. So they apparently tore to shreds the ride when they first went on it.
As I mentioned, those first things that you could see, like the little snowflake crystals, to kind of give you the effect that you were shrinking, they had, there were these massive snowflakes, but a lot of them, and they were, within arm's reach. And of course, people would have, that's just what they do. They would just grab them and tear them apart. Yes. So they had to kind of eventually put those farther apart.
Yes, so that even a 7-foot child could not reach them, and that became the envelope of security.
But another thing that happened, of course, was since this was the first array of like a dark ride, where it was really dark and a lot of darkness and unsupervised darkness, and a 6-minute attraction, people it kind of became Disneyland's first tunnel of love as well.
6 minutes is a long time, I suppose.
Yeah, and because so they did eventually have a closed circuit TV cameras in there, but I'm not sure if they let the guests know that we're watching you, because they became very amorous.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's another thing that happened with that. But yeah, so this was an incredible attraction. It was pretty much through the creation of Claude Coates and Yale Gracie, but mainly Claude Coates. This was his baby. He came up with a lot of the physical manifestations of what you see through here. At one point, though, in 1977, September 30th, Monsanto actually pulled its sponsorship. But the Mighty Microscope and the automobiles kept going all the way through September 2nd of 1985. Yeah.
I read somewhere, and I don't remember now if this was the Hall of Chemistry or Adventure Through Inner Space, that it was originally not a ticketed attraction.
Oh, this is Adventure Through Inner Space. That's a good point. Yes, so Monsanto
so there wasn't
wanted
a lot of money involved in sponsoring.
Yeah, they wanted to kind of showcase their product. So, yeah, it was a free ticket. But what happened? It wasn't completely free, and I'll explain. It was free for adults, but each ticket book had a free coupon for a child. For one child, so that a child would not be able to just ride by themselves over and over again. They would have to purchase a C ticket to do that.
Interesting.
But adults could ride it over and over. Very interesting.
Yeah. Weird how things were back then.
Yeah. And then eventually when it lost its free status and it became a C ticket all around.
Can you imagine that today if they were like, well, adults can ride for free? Like, even if they instituted a ticketing thing, like, everyone would go crazy.
But that's just the way it was. What's really interesting is that when I visited Disneyland, the one person that we knew that worked at Disneyland worked at Adventure Through Inner Space. It was a friend of my mother's. She was going to college at the time. So it was a college buddy of hers. He actually provided us, he would give us manila envelopes full of tickets, A through E tickets. I'm not sure where they came from, whether they were legitimate or not. I have no idea.
It's a different time.
It was a different time, but like, it was very weird. We would go to Disneyland, we would go to Adventure Through Inner Space. He would give us an envelope full of A through E tickets, and we would be able to ride everything all day long.
That's the way to do it.
I mean, I would think that they would mark the tickets because, you know, it wasn't just C tickets.
Yeah.
It was the whole deal. I don't know. I'll have to ask my mother.
He had a friend in ticketing or something.
I'll have to ask my mother what's going on with that situation because I never did question that. But I mean, because of him working there, we always rode that attraction. It became my favorite. I loved it so much.
Well, I definitely wish I could have seen Tomorrowland 67 or 77.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Actually, quite a while back, I guess it's probably over 10 years ago, I'm sure, somebody actually created a DVD of the entire attraction. I purchased this and I played it, and it's like it recreated the whole thing. Wow. I'll have to break that out again. But it was just like, it brought back a flood of memories. Just like, okay, I'm not sure how they were able to, find each thing, but they did, each element, and they were able to put it on the DVD so that, they had the full soundtrack and everything. So I'll have to maybe show a picture of that.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was very interesting. It was quite good. But yeah. So that takes us to the end of Adventure Through Inner Space. As I said, it did finally close in September of '85. They decided to go a different route. Star Tours. Yes. Which we all know and love. But space. I do miss Adventure Through Inner Space. They did, of course, put the Mighty Microscope in the original Star Tours. As you were kind of careening towards out of control in the beginning parts right before you were to crash into that fuel tank off to one of the sides, you would actually see the Mighty Microscope.
Oh, that's fun.
One there. Yeah.
Was that only in the Disneyland version?
No, that was in both.
Why did you never point this out to me?
I did.
Oh. Well, I didn't know what that was probably back then.
But in addition, in the queue area at Disneyland, which you have just told me that you have never seen, they had little baskets full of parts. So this is in the queue area of Star Tours. Baskets full of parts. But in some of the baskets, they actually had the little automobiles with some of the guests. Remember those
Oh,
little
yeah.
things that were in the Mighty Microscope? They had some of those in there, in the baskets,
Yes.
as another tribute.
Very fun.
Oh, yeah. So, I miss it. But it was a lot of fun.
It's very weird that, for the longest time I heard of what that ride was, but I never put two and two together, and I always just thought it was like deep space, like inner space, but it's really just molecules.
Yeah, it
So.
really is. And but it's just so weird because a lot of the things, especially towards the second half of the attraction, were things that weren't physical. They were
Right.
just kind of surreal.
Yeah.
Kind of things that would
You could use your imagination.
Use your imagination, exactly. So,
Yeah.
a very unique attraction. But yeah, I wanted to share that with y'all.
Well, it was a fun trip down memory lane, even though I wasn't there for Tomorrowland 67. I mean, you weren't there in 67.
No, I
obviously.
was not.
You were not born.
My
Yeah.
first visit to Disneyland was in 74.
Yes.
But it was that Tomorrowland that
Yeah.
I fell in love with.
Very fun. I hope that we are getting back to that classic mid-century modern
Oh, yeah.
Tomorrowland look. Excuse me. It seems like that is the direction that they're kind of going with, turning everything white again and more clean lines and things like that. So it's fun to go back and see what once was futuristic and think about all of the amazing things that came to be in Disneyland back then.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope you enjoyed this visit back to Tomorrowland 67 and A World on the Move.
Oh, yeah.
And we will see you next time for another episode of Up the Waterfall.
That's right. Bye now.